our customers have massive SQL landscapes, right? And really being able to bring that into the Fabric environment under one hood and being able to manage it there, have it available there, is a massive opportunity. But also it's an opportunity to help them bring additional value and speed to market by having this capability within the Fabric environment and ecosystem.
It has a clear vision of moving from just being an analytical data platform to being the data platform of the future. But I think in the long run, I'm even more excited about clients being able to utilize the Fabric database to create bespoke applications right there inside Fabric. Fabric suddenly covers all of your data for your whole organization. So all data workloads, all your data, all in one place.
We see getting operational data onto Fabric along with the analytics data is a game changer. Having both together will enable companies to reach out to their customers in a much more efficient and faster way.
Now with Fabric and much more modern technology, think of the value that you get by being able to go back and forth between operational and analytical and vice versa. This is just speed to market and much less integration work.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's session. My name is Askia, and I'm one of the event planners for the Redmond Reactor Space. Before we get started today, I've got a few things to go over, so if you could take a moment and please look at our code of conduct. Basically, what that is saying is that we seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We definitely encourage engagement in the chat, but we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional, and if possible, please try to stay on topic. We'll definitely be sharing useful links throughout this chat, so keep an eye out for that. And the session is going to be recorded. It will be available on demand in about 24 to 48 hours, and that can be found on the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel. Today's session is scheduled to run approximately 1 hour, and there'll definitely be time for questions throughout. So with that said, I will now hand it over to our speakers.
Amazing. Hi, folks. Thanks for tuning in. I will kick us off with some intros. My name is Anna Hoffman. I lead the SQL databases in Fabric and Tools team, and I'm super excited to be chatting with you all. We're looking forward to engaging with you. As Askia mentioned, we can see the comments. We're looking forward to really, hopefully, having this be a very engaging session where you ask us questions. In order to do that, we've brought a bunch of people from the SQL databases in Fabric team, and we'll just go down the line, starting with Amar.
Hey, morning, afternoon, folks. I'm Amar. I work on capacity, billing, free trial, and consumption metrics app experience for SQL database in Fabric. Excited to be here.
Hey folks, I'm Drew Squires-Cabala. I'm a PM that focuses on SQL DevOps, so deployments and development cycles. And with Fabric, SQL database in Fabric, you're seeing that surface as the source control integration and deployment pipelines in Fabric.
Hi everybody, I'm Dave Levi. I work on integrations, so everywhere that Fabric SQL database interacts with the other parts of Fabric.
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Happy that you guys all joined here. My name is Suquant. I'm a PM working on the provisioning and all things SQL database in Fabric. Looking forward to connecting with you guys and helping you answer your questions here. Over
Awesome.
to you, Anna.
And to wrap that, we also have a couple folks in the chat that we can pull in to this stream, depending on what your questions are. That includes Jakob, who leads the security for SQL database in Fabric, PM all up, as well as Tyler, who's one of the leads for product marketing for Fabric. So if you have any questions at any time, we're looking at the chat. I see already people are saying hello, good morning. I guess depending on where you are, this is a good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The way we kind of thought about this session is we'll take you through just an overview. We'll keep it really light on the slides, show you a demo, and then whatever questions you have, we'll start asking them to the right folks. As you can see on the video, we have a lot of folks who have different experience in Fabric SQL, so we should be able to answer hopefully all of your questions. So with that, I'm going to get right into just giving you a little motivation or explanation of what SQL Database in Fabric is and why it exists. Now, if you're watching this, hopefully you've heard of Microsoft SQL or this big family of databases that Microsoft has supported for a very, very long time. This includes things like SQL Server, which hopefully you've heard of. And the pitch we make is kind of from ground to cloud to Fabric. And we're basically bringing you this great enterprise engine across all flavors of wherever you might want to deploy that, whether that's in your private cloud, whether it's on-prem, whether it's in Azure with things like Azure SQL, which includes SQL Database, SQL Managed Instance, or SQL in a VM. And now, as of November, we recently went public preview with SQL Database in Fabric. So one of the great things about this engine is that it is a tried and tested database with millions and millions of deployments and many organizations running in production today, both their mission critical and maybe their fun hobbies projects using the SQL Server engine. So a lot to say there. Across all of these, what you get is the same T-SQL language that a lot of folks are probably familiar with, the same engine. So we use the same engine, though we expose different things in our different offerings. The same tools, so tools you've heard of, maybe like SSMS, Azure Data Studio, VS Code. You can use all of those with all of our SQL offerings. Copilots, this is something we're really working on, in AI as well. So you maybe have heard of the recent vector support that we've added. And Fabric is kind of the new one for us. So last year or even before that, we started with mirroring, which allows you to kind of replicate in near real time your data into OneLake or into Microsoft Fabric. And, you know, we're kind of taking cues from you all. So let me give you a little motivation of why we decided to go into Fabric with SQL Database. We know from various studies that 1 billion apps are going to be built in the next 5 years. And we know from our experience that many times every single application has some sort of database attached to it. So we can draw some loose correlation that maybe there's going to be the need for 1 billion more databases in the next year. In the next 5 years. And also on the front of AI, this is no surprise to anyone, but AI is really becoming a huge initiative in organizations, and many leaders of these organizations think AI is going to give them a competitive edge. So when you take into consideration, we have all these apps that are going to need to be built, supported, maintained, and also using AI, we thought, well, how can we make things easier for you to do that? And that's where we felt that Fabric came into the picture. And many of you probably know Microsoft Fabric. It's been available for a while, several years now. And it really is this great analytics platform that is taking software as a service to the next level. So really trying to make it really easy for you to build these integrated solutions across all types of workloads, while keeping some principles in mind, like Copilot across, all data landing in OneLake, and all data is secure and governed by default. So these are some of the themes that Microsoft Fabric has all up. And we saw what Microsoft Fabric has been doing and the adoption that it's been getting and the excitement around this software as a service, or making things easier, making things more autonomous so that we can build AI apps faster. And with that, we decided it was time for databases to make an entrance. And that's where we kind of come into where we are today. So today we are in public preview with SQL Database in Fabric. And again, just like SQL Server and Azure SQL Database, we're using the same engine. We're really building on top of Azure SQL Database here. So you can think of pretty much complete parity as you go from Azure SQL Database to SQL Database in Fabric. And these are some of the key themes we kept in mind. So at every decision, we wanted to think, okay, how are we making this new database offering simple, autonomous, and integrated? And all of these things should come by default. Things like secure by default, powered by the engine of SQL, and integrated with OneLake. So I mentioned this mirroring concept before. Basically, when you deploy a SQL database in Fabric, you get your SQL database, which is based on your typical MDF, LDF files and architecture that you all probably know about databases, or not, you don't need to. And then you get this data is also being replicated in near real time to Parquet, landing in OneLakes with all the other data in Fabric, where you can leverage shortcuts, notebooks, pipelines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the very, very quick overview on SQL database and Fabric. Last thing we want to do before we get to your questions, and I know there are coming in, so I'm really happy about that, is we are going to roll a demo video so you get a little glimpse at how this actually works. But before we roll the video, I just wanted to let you know that you can go try this today. We can share some more information about the various region availabilities and how to enable it if you have any questions. But you can go try this today. We start billing next week, but until then, this service is completely free for you to go try out. So with that, let's go ahead and roll the demo.
Recommendations and support. I've got the UI piece built, but it needs the latest AI models and access to our data. We have everything we need for our whole data platform in Fabric, and this now includes SQL Database, which is built on top of the SQL Server and Azure SQL Database engine. One of the great things about Fabric is it makes getting started super easy. Let me show you how quickly I can set up a database. I just provide a name and click Create. Provisioning takes seconds. I can use Copilot to help jumpstart my work. It gives assistance designing my database and writing queries, both inline and in the chat. Here I'm asking Copilot how to automatically generate values for a column so I can develop my app. It explains several solutions like identity columns, default constraints, and computed columns, as well as the code needed to make it work. Now that you've seen how easy it is to get started, let's switch to the Fabric database we're using in production for our app. We're storing a lot of information related to the products that we sell, along with descriptions, inventory, order details, and more. Remember, since this is built on top of SQL Server and Azure SQL Database, it's got the T-SQL support you know and love, so I can write queries just as I'm already familiar with. In addition to T-SQL compatibility, managing these databases is easy. SQL databases in Fabric are zone redundant by default to keep them highly available. They're also secure by default and autonomous. Not only is my database auto-scaling to give me the best price performance, both from a compute and storage perspective, but it's also optimizing my indexes and applying the best practices by default. Now I need to implement the RAG pattern using our data to generate product recommendations for the chat app. With new native vector type support in SQL Database, I can easily make use of the latest AI models or any model in the Azure AI Foundry model catalog. I can generate embeddings, which are numerical representations of the data, for all the product data and store the vectors in my database. I can then use built-in functions like vector distance to search for results. SQL Database works with popular frameworks like LangChain and Semantic Kernel, which made it super easy for me to build a natural language chat experience with vector search. You can see here I can search for similar phones to the Alva Phone X1 with a better camera. All the chat history is also stored in the SQL database, and all the data is fully integrated into OneLake in Fabric as Delta Parquet. This means my data is available to seamlessly use in any other Fabric workload and anywhere across my organization. For example, I can connect Power BI directly to the data and even use Copilot to quickly generate a report. Let's ask for a breakdown of chat interactions by sentiment and number of turns. And just like that, Copilot has generated the report. And I can see that the more turns users are doing in the chat, the more often they're ending in a purchase. And since this is all integrated in Fabric, data updates in the SQL database are instantly available in my report. Switching back to look at my solution in Fabric, you can see how Fabric has become the data layer for my AI app. From my database in the report you just saw, to services related to event streaming and data pipelines, to the APIs my app uses, and more. With Fabric, you can build AI apps faster and easier than ever. Try it for free today.
Awesome. So with that being said, I think we can move to just video, and we will start to take a look at your questions. Now, we have had quite a few questions come in already, so that's great. So we're going to pull up some of these. I know some folks from our team have answered them in chat, but we want to make sure we get to all the good ones. So let's start with this question from Eddie Kwan, and we can take the slides off the screen too. And Eddie Kwan asks, do you need an F64 to see SQL Server? And I'm assuming, Eddie, you mean SQL database in Fabric in your tenant. And for that question, I'm going to ask Amar.
Yeah, no, Eddie, thanks for your question. I don't think you need an F64. It all depends on your workload and how much, like, what is the requirement of your workload, but you can pretty much start with F2, F4, F6. It just depends on what your workload needs. So you don't need an F64.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Amar. Hopefully that helped Eddie. This next question comes from Kayum. Apologies if I mispronounced your name. But this person says, hello, when should I choose Azure SQL Database first? Fabric database. Okay, you really aren't letting any of us off the hook easy today. This is really truly a it depends question. I'll give my take, and then I'd love if anyone else from the team want to chime in on that. In my view today, if you're using Azure SQL Database, there's no need to kind of pick up and move to SQL Database in Fabric. You're getting a lot of the same benefits. You probably already have this thing configured the way that you want. If you want to take advantage of Fabric, in this case, I would recommend mirroring, which you can turn on for your Azure SQL databases or your SQL managed instances. And essentially, that's going to allow you to land that data in Parquet in one lake, and you can start to take advantage of everything in Fabric itself without needing to go through that migration journey. Now, if you are starting a new application and you're trying to figure out, should this go in Azure or should it go in Fabric, you want to think about the levels of management that you want to be a part of. Now, you think about some of the key themes that we're trying to go after, which is simple, autonomous, and secure, as well as integrated and kind of AI ready for AI applications. And if that aligns with what you want, so you want less of that management overhead, you don't want to worry about all the different configurations, all the different controls, and you don't need all the different configurations and all the different controls, then I think that's a great opportunity to start testing out SQL Database in Fabric. One other thing to just call out is that SQL Database in Fabric is a public preview service, which means it's not generally available. It doesn't come with all the promises as far as SLA, et cetera, et cetera. So you just want to exercise a little bit of caution before going into production with any public preview product from Microsoft. So if you're launching tomorrow and it's a mission critical app, probably you're going to start with Azure SQL Database, but hopefully you'll consider SQL Database in Fabric for your future projects. With that, I'll open to others. Anyone else want to chime in on their thoughts there?
So Anna, you hit all the good points. I just wanted to mention one more value add when somebody's, let's say, creating a brand new application and they have to make a choice between SQL database and Fabric SQL. When you create your database in Fabric, when you create SQL database in Fabric, the replication, the mirroring is already set for you. So the data, the moment you start putting your data in SQL, it starts getting replicated for you in one lake that you can use for your any kind of reporting needs or data engineering needs. So that's a very important part. And like Anna mentioned, if you are a developer out there who has not done anything with databases in the past and you are a little bit intimidated, this is a perfect place for you to come in and get your feet tapped in. You just click on the new, put in your name, your database is created, take the help of Copilot to create T-SQL for you to create tables, or just click on the get data to get your data populated and start writing your applications to it directly. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Saquan. Anyone else want to chime in with any reasons they might use Azure SQL Database versus SQL and Fabric?
You know, pretty much covered most of the areas, Anna, Saquan. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you didn't leave us a lot of...
Sorry, guys. Well, no problem. We have lots more questions. All right, this next question, I think, Drew, you briefly answered in the chat, but let's give it some love. Octavian said, is SQL Database already integrated with deployment pipelines and Git integration? And maybe you could tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so deployment pipelines and Git integration are a part of the Fabric platform. So if you're familiar with SQL Server, but you're not as familiar with these two specific terms, There are obviously concepts that are available for any application development, but within the Fabric platform, there are easy to set up multi-stage deployment pipelines, as well as an in-browser Git integration. And so for SQL database in Fabric, because of existing investments that we have for SQL Server, we were able to have those at, like I said, day 0/day 1. They were part of the original private preview, and they're there now for you in public preview. What this means is that if you create a SQL database in Fabric, you add some objects to it, you can, from the browser, connect that workspace right to a Git repository in Azure DevOps or GitHub, and then commit that database to source control. And it puts in source control a definition of all the objects. That's pretty cool and streamlined, because now your database is in source control. You can keep an eye on those changes over time. But where it kind of goes like mind-blowing cool is that this is built on top of the existing SQL project's capabilities. So not only is there desktop client tooling already available in like Visual Studio and VS Code, but it's also two-directional. So if you are working across multiple branches or someone makes changes offline, you can bring those back in again through that source control pane in the browser extension. And then, not to make it sound even cooler, but all of those existing, the Visual Studio and the VS Code desktop client experiences can also be used as a part of establishing really advanced deployment processes, like using Azure DevOps pipelines or GitHub Actions. You can still use your existing investments for SQL DevOps with SQL Database and Fabric. You're not locked into deployment pipelines and Git integration in Fabric. It's just really simple to set up and quick to use. And again, it's been part of it from day one.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew. Octavian, hopefully that helps and excites other people who might not have explored that functionality yet. This next question I'm going to toss to Amar, but we can chime in as needed. Devin asks, do you need an F64 license to get the Copilot building tables for you in Fabric SQL database?
Can you repeat the question, Anna? Sorry, I missed
Yes.
that.
So basically they're asking, is the F64 requirement for Copilot there? And I can definitely help if you need help.
Yeah, sure. Anna, go ahead with your perspective. I'm not quite
Sure. Yeah. So recently they came out with a new way of doing the Copilot capacity. We can find a link for you to share with that. But I think my general takeaway, Devin, is that you do need whatever Copilot capacity is required in order to use the Copilot for SQL database in Fabric. And we can get the exact requirements for you.
So, and I just want to add to this one. Yes, there was a time when we had that requirement that you needed F64 for Copilot. But what you just mentioned, that there are some new development in Copilot area that you can have a separate capacity for it, and then you can use it for any of your workload. You can decide, because it's expensive, right? So
absolutely. Thanks, Saquon.
Thank you.
Okay, this next one we can try to answer. I'm going to pass it to Dave. It come from Adrian. And Dave, we can all help out if you need it. Adrian says, DBCC works for some calls, though from what I've seen, only a few commands seem to work. Should we expect more functionality to be released in this space in the future?
So that's a really good question. What we've been striving for is an autonomous database. So the idea is we want to take care of everything that you would need DBCC for, and then just expose the calls that we would leave to you. If there's certain calls that you think would be useful, if you could drop us some feedback on the ideas site and tell us, what command and why it would be useful, that would help us out a lot. But the idea here is that we're trying to take the work out of managing a database so you can just focus on building and running good apps. And once you've got your database schema laid down and you're happy with it, you've written your stored procedures, you've got everything worked out, we want to try and manage all that for you so that you can focus on growing your business and doing other things.
Awesome. I love that. Yep, Adrian, hopefully that helps, and a good plug for the ideas site. Yeah, Drew.
I just want to jump in real quick. I saw a couple questions in the chat on the theme of can I use SSMS to manage SQL database and Fabric and other tools? And I think in the chat, we definitely touched on, yes, you can absolutely use SSMS to connect to SQL database and Fabric and VS Code, that extension there and everything. But what I also wanted to like bring back into this answer here that from Dave and others is there's a lot less management as a part of SQL database and Fabric, kind of as we saw originally across the spectrum of the SQL engine from SQL Server, where you do have a lot of management to do in SSMS. Management becomes less and less, so your reliance on the depth of features in SSMS is going to be a lot lighter.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Drew. Hopefully that helps folks. All right. I was trying to find a link for you guys. I will look for it at another time. We're going to keep going down the list of questions. There's a lot of questions. This next one comes from Garrett. I'll take a first stab, and then Amar, if you could chime in a little bit about more how the capacity model works, I think that would be helpful. But Garrett says, how does memory management work? If I were to run a query against a SQL database in Fabric that asks for a fairly large memory grant, does this negatively impact other Fabric items? So the thing I'll start with before passing to Amar is that with SQL database and Fabric, we are auto-scaling you, very similar to the way serverless works for Azure SQL Database on a per second basis based on the max of memory or CPU that you need at that given time. So what that basically means is like, yes, if you need more CPU or more memory for your query, then we're going to scale you up, and that's going to consume more capacity. And I'll let Amar kind of explain more about, how that capacity works between workloads.
Yeah, I think Anna, you covered part of it. I think another insight there is it's capacity-based compute allocation. So essentially, the more memory you need, it'll just adjust the compute based on the capacity that you've selected for your workload. There's also like workload isolation. There's intelligent caching. There's a lot of things to make sure that if you're using it with other services, there's enough isolation there to protect based on your capacity and isolation for the workload. In this case, your SQL database in Fabric. So there's quite a few things in the works that make sure that it's as optimized as it can be for your workload in Fabric.
Awesome. Thanks, Amar. Great. Okay, we're going to keep going. The next question is Roman. And Saquon, I'll pass this question to you. And if needed, we can call a friend and pull Jakob in. But Roman says, is it possible to share a semantic model through manage access? Because we don't want to give view access to our whole workspace. Our users can see other shared objects except models.
So what I would say in this case, let's say you have a workspace and you have five, six different artifacts. And when you look at your SQL database, there are two subcomponents to it. One is semantic model and one is SQL Analytics endpoint. When you decide on the permission, what I would suggest is do the start the permission at the artifact level. So when you select that item, there are three dots. When you click on it, you see something called share. When you click on that, there's a pop-up that will come up. You put the group name or a person's name there and don't select any of the options there and hit grant. That will give you a connect access, which is to that artifact. And you can go inside SQL to grant, fine-tune your permissions there. Now, semantic model, I have not delved too much into it. Jakub or anybody else, if you have further information on that.
Yeah, sure. So in that dialogue that you mentioned, Suquant, the share dialogue, there is also the build permission, which controls access to the underlying semantic model, I believe. So you can grant just this permission, and then the users will be able to read and access and build reports on top of the semantic of the model. The side effect of it, however, will be that you also will be granting these users read permission to the database. So they will be able to connect, but they won't be able to do anything else inside the database.
Got it. Thanks, Jakob and Saquon. Okay, we're going to keep going. I'm going to combine a couple questions. You guys are really awesome with asking all these questions. Okay, the themes of these questions, and Drew, this is coming for you. We can start with, well, I'll just pull a couple of the questions together. But essentially, there's a couple questions that are asking about migration, and there's a couple questions about how do I do kind of like a backup restore sort of operation in SQL database in Fabric? So Drew, can you take that one kind of broadly?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the migration. Like I have an app that I just started building in Azure SQL database. Now I'm thinking maybe I want to try it out in SQL database in Fabric. What is my what's my go-to plan here? There's an article in the docs that talks about using SQL package with SQL database in Fabric. SQL package is a CLI that you can run from Mac, Windows, Linux, wherever. And you'll take a backpack, you'll export this all-in-one backpack file from Azure SQL database, and then you can import that to Fabric SQL database. The restriction here when you're looking at migrating something into Fabric SQL database is it has to be compatible with the SQL feature set that's available in SQL database and Fabric. The good news, and this has come up a few times in the chat, is like, what T-SQL can I use? Can I use identity? Yes. Fabric SQL database is very, very close to Azure SQL database. So you're going to have a good path from there. If you're looking at bringing something out of SQL Server, same pathway of using SQL package and backpacks, but you're going to have to be a little bit more careful as far as potentially some on-prem SQL Server specific T-SQL. The backup functionality for SQL database and Fabric, like you have a database in SQL database and Fabric and you want to manage like making a copy of it, the point in time restore backup and restore functionality is there within Fabric in our public preview. And so you can use that to make another copy of the database from a previous point. This is all kind of automatically configured for you behind the scenes. If you need to bring a database out of Fabric, maybe you start working in Fabric and realize there is some additional configuration you want to be able to do that's available in Azure SQL database, you can do the reverse of SQL package in backpacks. The point in time restore area is not my specialty, so I did want to open that up to anyone else on the team potentially wanting to make a comment on it. Go ahead, Sukwant.
So currently, when you create a database in Fabric, the backup is happening automatically. You don't have to do anything for that. But let's say you want to create a new database based on your backup. Yes, you can select the database and you can hit the restore. You can pick the last point that you want to use for your restore, and it's a GUI based experience. Very easy. That is possible. Through that. And I wanted to add one more thing too. If let's say somebody has their presence in Azure SQL and they want to bring it to Fabric and try it out, what they can use the data pipelines or data gen flow. They can make Azure SQL as their source and Fabric SQL as their destination. There's a little bit more work involved in that. It's not so there are some articles, blog posts on that out there. Let me see if I can find something and share.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sukwant. Kind of related to this, there's a question by MIT USA 1234566. And this person says, we already have Azure SQL for our high volume data. What's a good use case for using Fabric database? Mirroring. And so for this one, Dave, I wanted to get your thoughts on like what are some good ways that people, whether they're using Azure SQL database, Azure SQL Managed Instance, or SQL Server running somewhere else, to kind of get started with SQL database in Fabric or kind of dip their toes in or try out some scenarios.
So this is actually a really hard question. There's a lot of it depends here. If you just want to do reporting off your data, then yeah, mirroring's great. In mirroring, you can take the entire database, get it to one lake, and have all of your tables out there so your reporting users can grab them and start to build things off of them without impacting your production workload. But there's also another scenario where, like, say you just want to dip your toes, and this could be Azure SQL, this could be on-prem SQL. Say you've got a data warehouse running on-prem SQL, and you just want to see what it would look like to be in Fabric. Transactional replication works too. So you can set up transactional replication from either a on-prem SQL Server, a VM in Azure, actually any VM, and SQL Managed Instance. So what you could do is say, I've got a couple tables, I want to put them out there in Fabric SQL database and see what they look like in the Fabric ecosystem and start to play around with the different integrations we have. So for like Azure SQL, You could definitely use mirroring, move things out there. You could use data pipelines, like Saquon said. There's a lot of options. That's kind of where the it depends comes from. I could probably talk too long about this, but yeah, there's a lot of different ways to try it out. So for Azure SQL Database, I would say mirroring is a really good way to get started. For other form factors, I would say either mirroring or replication would be a good way to go.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dave. Okay, so for this next set of questions, I'm going to see if I can convince Jakob, our backstage security expert, to come on stage with camera. We'll see if he's up for that. Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Jakob. Okay, so this question, we're getting a couple questions on the security and the governance front. So I thought it would be great to have you come on and just tell us a little bit about how Purview support works with SQL Database and Fabric, and then maybe also touching a little bit on row-level security, because that seems to have come up a couple times.
Right. So what you can do today regarding Purview and SQL Database together, you can label all Fabric items, including SQL databases, with sensitivity labels defined in Purview. And in Purview Compliance Portal, you can define protection policies referencing these sensitivity labels that can effectively restrict access to the label items, including databases. So if a user has a permission in Fabric to view or to administer a database, let's say, a policy in Purview can restrict, effectively revoke that permission from the user if the database is labeled with a given label. So that's the functionality we support today. Now, the story around integrating Fabric in general with Microsoft Purview is a developing story. There are some exciting and ambitious goals that we have that will unfold over time. But yeah, that's where we are today. There was a question about column level support or protecting data at lower level of granularities than databases. We don't support that today, but we definitely thinking about it. Actually, doing more than thinking, we actively looking into extending that support to sub-item levels below the database. And regarding row-level security, so SQL Database supports native SQL row-level security that is not the same as row-level security, let's say, in Power BI. It's our native mechanism. So yes, that you can configure that. T-SQL is currently the supported way to configure row-level security in SQL Database.
Awesome.
Have I answered all the questions?
I think so. Yeah, I was just going to give a shameless plug. Folks who are tuning in, yesterday, Jakob and I recorded an episode for Data Exposed, which if you haven't heard of it, we'll put a link in the chat for you to check it out. But we've been running this SQL Database in Fabric series, and I think next week or the week after that, Jakob's episode is coming out, and that's where you can learn all about the security features that the team is driving. So thanks, Jakob. Awesome. Okay, so lots of questions coming in. I'm going to grab a question. Let's see. Let's grab, okay, here's a easy one from Riz. I'll give this one to you, Amar. When mirroring an Azure SQL database, would there be an additional license cost for Fabric? Thanks, Riz.
It seems like a loaded question. I'll try to break it down a little bit. So essentially, for using the Azure mirroring function itself, you would need like either a trial capacity, a premium capacity, or like you have to be on like Fabric capacity. So I don't know if that is part of your question where you wanted to understand costs overall, like licensing wise, right? But once you start mirroring itself, there's no per se cost of like compute, but then there's a certain amount of storage that you would get included as part of your capacity when you start mirroring to that extent. So I think just understanding like if you're part of the premium capacity in Fabric or just Fabric capacity or like trial capacity in general, like that should be part of your evaluation for like what this license cost means.
Awesome. Thanks, Amar. I'll take this next question. It comes from Simon. Simon says, when will Fabric be available in the Azure Gov Cloud? Yeah, this is a great question and really about Fabric all up, not necessarily SQL database in Fabric. But I will share this is something the team is working on. We've been hearing about a lot. If you can add your vote in the ideas site, I think that would help. But I do believe they have something you'll hear about at some point in the near future. Unfortunately, I can't share more than that. But the next thing I'll ask, and I'm not sure if this question comes from Czar, and I'm not sure if this is better for Amar or Dave, so you just, decide or hash it out who should answer. But the question is, should I use Fabric workspace monitoring features or Database Watcher to monitor the performance of SQL database in the Fabric?
Go ahead, Dave. I'll go after you.
So I would say that it depends. I keep saying it depends, but it really does. It really depends on what you're trying to do and like how much the application needs monitoring. Fabric workspace monitoring is lighter weight. It's more intuitive and easier to use. Not that Database Watcher isn't, but Database Watcher has a lot more information. So if you're just looking for real quick, how's my database doing? Do I have any performance issues in my queries or anything like that, like a quick look, then the monitoring in Fabric is probably going to do what you need. If you're running like you shouldn't be running production yet, but if you're running like a full-fledged application, you may want to graduate up to Database Watcher just to have that SQL-specific knowledge that it has. And Amar, I'll let you add to it.
No, I'll just add another tool like the performance dashboard. I don't know if you covered that. That's a great tool. I think it's one of my favorite tools in Fabric. So if you haven't, if you haven't explored it, do try it out. I think it has some exceptional features there just to look at your CPU peak times for your queries and, just reducing the time window and really getting into like what's causing your spike for your workload. So I think that's a great feature. So just to add to what Dave said, yeah.
Awesome. Great. This question is a little bit more vague, so we'll pass it to Drew and he can decide what to do with it. This question comes from Octavian, who said, what are some of the management options for SQL database in Fabric?
You're right. That is kind of vague. So the it depends is it depends on what you're wanting to manage. Keeping in mind that Fabric runs management from the tenant level to the workspace level, and then there are still some capabilities within Fabric SQL database as well for management. The scaling of your database is managed automatically by the platform, so that's not something that you're going to be toggling up and down. But in terms of the HADR options, there is still some capability to modify that within a workspace. That's not something I've got a good depth of knowledge on. Again, I'll have to punt that off to someone else. Now, as far as like management interfaces, you can still use like you would be for connecting to a SQL server or Azure SQL Database or MI. You can still be using like the SQL CMD CLI. I mentioned SQL package already. You can hop into SSMS. You can use VS Code, Azure Data Studio, all of those management interfaces that you're used to using to open up and connect and query. That's all still available. So something else that kind of came up in the chat around how can I manage this thing was automatic indexing. Automatic indexing is turned on by default. So the management of those automatic indexes is not something you're going to mess around with, but this is also an example of a place where we've been able to improve on things that are available in Azure SQL Database because of the Fabric platform. So you're able to get better visibility to those automatic indexes by leveraging the source control integration. For example, you can see the changes to those and kind of keep that logged right in a project history.
Awesome.
Did anyone else want to comment on the HADR thing that I kind of tossed out there?
Okay. All right. We'll keep going. Thank you, Drew. If you have follow-up questions, please let us know. I think we touched on most of them. As far as backup and restore goes, Octavian, for your most recent chat, as well as point-in-time restore. Saquant, do you want to comment on where we're at with those two things today?
Anna, can you repeat what was the management?
Yeah, so I think Octavian's basically
Okay.
asking, like, how often are my backups being taken, and can I do point-in-time restore, that sort of thing.
So backups, I don't know the time, if anybody else knows how
Sure.
often they're being taken, but if you can do the restore, by going directly to the database. Right now, we have only one entry point to create your restore, but we have plans to improve it for the GA. So right now, if you go to your database, click on the three dots, you can see a restore option. When you click on the restore, you'll see a GUI where you can pick the new name for the database and pick which time frame do you want to go back to, and that will create your database. But I totally understand that's not enough, and we need to provide more. So we are working on it. And about index rebuild, I think indexes are getting built automatically for you, but let's say you want to build your own index, you can definitely use T-SQL to create your indexes. That is still allowed, just like you do in Azure SQL.
Awesome. The one thing I'll chime in on backups, I was trying to find the exact policy that you have. It's the same as what we have for Azure SQL Database. I think it's full backups every 24 hours or every 7 days with diff backups, and all that stuff is there. So it's all there, just like it is in Azure SQL Database. We can find a link to the docs for that, but hopefully that helps. Generally with that question, that, like, yes, we're considering all the enterprise features, enterprise readiness features especially, and that's something that our roadmap is super focused on as well. Okay, so another question, let's see, that hasn't been answered is, okay, we've answered. So there's one question from Adrian about undocumented features from standard SQL Server that would be useful in the cloud as well. Adrian, for this, and Dave, if you want to comment on SP MS4H table, because I'm not familiar with it, feel free. But generally the idea site is probably the best place to kind of log any features that you want that aren't there, whether they're in standard SQL Server or not. But Dave, do you want to comment on anything else there?
We're really not supposed to comment on undocumented features. So while I do enjoy them, I can't support the use of them.
Okay, fair. So Adrian, use the idea site and you let us know. Yeah, and we'll go from there. This next question is from Ali, sorry. We are on-prem now and planning to move to Azure SQL. Do you recommend now to move to Fabric SQL? So I'll take this and then people can chime in. It's a huge, it depends. Like, what were you doing on-prem and what do you want to do when you move to the cloud? So as we kind of mentioned, we don't have like extremely advanced migration technologies for you to go from on-prem directly into Fabric SQL database, but we do have some options that are available for you. If you are like saying, hey, I am finally ready to migrate to the cloud and migrate to Fabric because I want to take advantage of all the things that Fabric is providing me, this SaaS, software as a service type of experience, this unified billing, this integration with other services, this ease of opening up your data for analytics, as well as any operational needs you get from a SQL database, then sure, yeah, take advantage of SQL database and Fabric. Now, if there are other reasons that you are considering moving to the cloud, like I think your reasons for wanting to move to the cloud are probably going to be a big factor in where you want to land. One thing I'll call out is that with SQL database and Fabric, with billing that will start very soon, but does not start as of today, is that there's no license cost in our offering. So what that means is, like, if you have a bunch of licenses, you don't need them when you move to a Fabric SQL database. So depending on your situation there, you might be interested in taking advantage of something in Azure, like Azure Hybrid Benefit. Dave, any other thoughts on that generally, or anyone else?
It's such a tough one. Really, it depends. I will say a lot of applications on-prem, they've been built over time. There's something that you've built and you thought users were gonna use it one way, and now they're using it a different way. And you need those extra knobs and levers that Azure SQL has to be able to make your workload still perform right, even though, you've got those challenges. So, that could be a big differentiator there. But for, probably 80% of applications, you could just move them to Fabric SQL and they'll run there. It's really those applications where you need those extra knobs and levers, and you already know which ones those are because you're probably spending more time working on them, that would be a really better fit for Azure SQL.
Awesome. Thank you.
The other thing I'm going to give a quick shout out to is just, as you're considering, I want to move into Azure, it's not just like, can I get to Azure SQL Database or SQL Database in Fabric, but you also have Azure SQL Managed Instance that gives you a benefit that a lot of people are looking for in terms of reducing the amount of management. While, as Dave was really great calling out, like you may have levers that you have to be able to pull because of these ways that your application has evolved. Azure SQL Managed Instance might be helping you move along that journey.
Great points. Great points. Anyone else want to add anything? Okay. This next question comes from Nicholas. Nicholas says, my app runs a survey once per year per client for about a week. Can my database scale to 0 so I only pay storage costs? Amar, you want to take that one?
Yeah, scenario seems very interesting. My app only runs a survey once a year per client about a week. Can it scale to 0? So I can pay only. It depends on your app, I would say, Nicholas. It's hard for us to give you an answer without understanding your scenario a little more. I guess it's a huge it depends question for now. Yeah.
Sure, Saquon.
I would. So if I am doing this survey, it sounds very, very lightweight. I would say go for it. This is perfect scenario in my mind, personally. If you are just running it for some time, because if it's sleep, so when you're not using your database, it gets paused. So you're not using compute, you're not using, of course, storage you're not using compute, so you're not going to get charged. So this is a perfect scenario where you can bring it to SQL DB in Fabric.
Yeah, essentially, it's like what Sukhwanda is also trying to say is like it depends on the activity of your survey and how like frequently you're using it. For intermittent usage during the day, like if you just run your app once and you're done for the day, it tends to go to a lower cost because of something called auto pause. In 15 minutes, you'll have 0 cost for compute, but it's not absolutely 0 or an absolute number there. You'll have some cost to pay. So great point though, Sukhwanda, lightweight. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. This next question came recently from Greg, and a couple other people asked about this, and I wasn't able to find it. So we'll just start with Greg's message. He says, jumped in late. Have y'all already talked about write back? Since I can't find the full question that was asked earlier, Dave, do you think you can just share a little bit about the write back scenario? And I think the question earlier was like, we saw something about this a while back. What's going on? Oh, you're muted, Dave, or at least I can't hear you.
One of these days I'll learn how to use a computer. Oh boy. So yeah, this is the translytical task flows that were announced at Ignite. The private preview is going to be starting up for that soon. I'm not sure how, well, let's just dig into what the scenario is. So really what it does, it's a cool scenario. It combines Power BI with Fabric functions to allow you to add functionality to your Power BI report so you don't have to leave. If you want to do a data update, or if you want to have users take an action based on report information, like information they're seeing in the report, then you can click a button right there in the report and it will call an Azure function and do whatever you need it to do. That's a natural pairing with SQL database. So we've been working with them along the way, and they're starting their private preview very soon. So keep an eye out for news on that.
Awesome. Cool. Hopefully that helped. Yeah, Saquon.
I wanted to quickly add to it. I read a blog post by Shabnam where she was trying to create the similar ask. It's not through functions, but what we are saying is when you create a SQL database, the data gets replicated, right? So she had a Power App connected to SQL, and you were modifying it there, and the data was quickly getting modified into your SQL Analytics endpoint. So you can put that component and your report right there, and you can do the same thing. But I'm sure the functions will make it super easy. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Saquon. Thanks, folks. This question I'll open for anyone who wants to answer it. Let's see. This question is a hard question. Let's see. So this question comes from MIT USA 1234566. What is the future path of Fabric database? Is Microsoft Fabric team committed to put money behind it? Anyone want to answer that one? Or not?
So I alluded to this in a comment on YouTube, where I was reminding folks that we're in public preview. We have a roadmap that we've mentioned a little bit around making sure that our enterprise features, in terms of HADR and backup restore, all of these things are not only available in the UI as well as T-SQL and other APIs, so that you can manage as you need your SQL database in Fabric. But we have the rest of the roadmap to continue building out. And so that ideas site is so important for us to hear from you, because we are continuing to invest in SQL database and Fabric and making it a good place to build your application, whether it is analytics to operational or operational to analytics or just operational, that there's interest in all of those spaces. So I can't comment if it's like $2 signs or $3 signs or $1 sign, but there is a future path that involves ensuring that the enterprise features are done. If you wanted to ask me more about DevOps, I can get all excited about that, and we can talk about the future options for deployments and development cycle. So there's options there, and we are continuing to move forward.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Drew. I like that answer. And yeah, I think if you look at the energy that Microsoft is putting behind Fabric in the public, then I think you could make some conclusions around that Microsoft is betting big on Fabric. And so we're going to continue to invest in SQL database and Fabric, and we're really just getting started. That's my take. There have been a couple questions from Simon in the past few minutes. One is Microsoft thinking of shutting down Synapse in the future since everything is coming to Fabric? And the other is, do I still need Power BI licenses along with Fabric? I'm going to be really honest, Simon, we are not the right people to answer those questions. For your first question about shutting down Synapse, yeah, no comment on that one. If you have any Synapse contacts at Microsoft or even like the Fabric DW team, that would be a better place to pose that question. I just don't want you to think we're ignoring your question. The second question that you asked was, do I still need a Power BI licenses with Fabric? I think you don't need them. There are these P SKUs and F SKUs, so you could move to an F SKU. Again, I'm not an expert in that space. I don't know, Amar, if you have any other advice on that. I think P SKUs are going away, but again, even that I don't really know. So Amar, anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just quickly add, not a complete expert here, but depends on your scenario again, like what do you want to do? There's you have like a pro license, pay per user, PPU license. Like if you want to publish reports, like what do you want to do with Power BI? That really gives you an idea like what type of license to use. So not a ton like what you can or cannot do in a combination. Like don't have a ton of ideas there, but yeah.
Awesome. I was trying to look for who asked this question, but someone asked a question about notebook support. Here it is. It's from Octavian at 48. And he says, can I work with SQL database from inside notebooks like I can with lakehouses? Dave, do you want to take that one?
Sure. We're still working on timing for when that will appear, but we are working on getting that in there. Would love it if you could drop us feedback or an upvote at the ideas site so we can start to tally the support for the feature. But it is definitely something that we want to get out there.
Thanks, Dave. And one last question we'll take, Dave, this one's also for you. This one's from Katuk. They say, do not see the option of Fabric database as a connection type in copy activity and data pipeline if I parameterize the connection. Is that something you know about, Dave, or is that something we maybe, okay.
Yeah, that's something that the team is working on. I don't have a date to share, but that is something that we hope to resolve in the near term. There's a few things like the stored procedures, and I'm blanking on the other operators right now, but there's a few things that we're looking to wrap up so that we get the full SQL DB functionality in data pipelines.
Awesome. Cool. Dave, thanks so much. Amar, Drew, Saquant, Jakob, Askia, our producer, everyone who tuned in, we just want to thank you for taking time out of your days to ask us your questions, engage with us. Like, our call to action is please, please, please go try this out and use the ideas slide, check out our blogs, give us feedback. Like I said earlier, we're just getting started. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the collaboration. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you to the Fabric team for an excellent session. We are always looking for feedback. So if you could take a moment and fill out our survey, that would be fantastic. Basically, what you'll want to do, we put the link on the screen and it's also in the chat as well. Big thing here is you'll just want to make sure to reference the event code for today's session, which is 24503. Once again, that is 24503. And we appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.